In less than 24 hours, more than $50 million would disappear from one of Northern Ireland's largest banks, and almost nobody would even know the robbery was happening. It was December 20th, 2004. Belfast was preparing for Christmas. The city was crowded. The streets were filled with people returning home from work, and inside one of Northern Ireland's largest banks, employees were finishing what looked like a completely ordinary workday. Everything seemed normal. But while the city continued its normal daily life, a perfectly planned operation was quietly unfolding for months. A criminal organization had been studying the bank, its routines, its employees, its security procedures. They calculated every entrance, every exit, every security checkpoint, and every shift change. And eventually, they discovered something terrifying. The easiest way inside the bank wasn't through the vault doors. It was through the people working inside. Later that night, 2 bank employees returned home believing the day was finally over. One sat down for dinner with his family. The other relaxed in front of the television. Everything still seemed normal. Then there was a knock at the door. Knocking sound. The men outside claimed to be police officers, and for a brief moment, the bank employees and their families believed them. Until the door opened. Masked men forced their way inside. Families were separated. Phones were taken away. Children were moved into different rooms. And in an instant, the employees realized this was not an ordinary robbery. The kidnappers give them a simple instruction. Go to work tomorrow, act normal, open the vault, or your family dies. But the most disturbing part was what happened afterward. The kidnappers didn't want panic. They wanted them to act normal. Families were told to behave as if nothing had happened, eat dinner, watch television, sleep, while armed men silently waited inside the house. And by sunrise, the real robbery would begin. The next morning, the 2 bank employees left home to go to work, but nothing was normal anymore. Their families were still being held hostage. They were afraid they would be killed, and their every move was being watched. On their way, they had to appear normal. They couldn't panic. They couldn't call the police. A single mistake could mean their families would die. When they arrived at the bank, everything looked completely normal. Employees greeted one another. Customers were coming in. Tellers were preparing for the day. No one knew that the bank had already been taken over, because the robbers hadn't broken in with weapons. They were having the bank open from the inside, and the employees, for the first time in their lives, walked through the hallways they walked every day in fear. As the hours passed, the plan slowly began to move into action. Security doors were opened, locked corridors were accessed, and deep inside the bank, cash worth millions of dollars was waiting in the vaults. The employees had to make everything look normal. They had to look a security guard straight in the eye and act as if nothing was wrong. But if one of them made a mistake, their families could die. That's why the operation proceeded almost flawlessly. And as the bank approached closing time, the real robbery began. In the evening hours, most of the employees inside the bank left the building. Only a few people with the necessary access remained. And at that exact moment, millions of dollars began to be pulled from the vaults. The cash was packed into boxes, but they couldn't afford to draw attention, so the boxes were covered with old office items. Broken chairs, file boxes, trash. From the outside, it looked like an ordinary delivery, but inside those boxes, there was a fortune. And while all of this was happening, security guards were still standing just a few feet away. No alarms were going off. There was no panic. Everything looked disturbingly normal. But the operation wasn't entirely flawless. Later that night, a couple noticed suspicious activity around the bank. They thought something was wrong, and they called the police. This was one of the most dangerous moments of the entire operation, because the police were far closer to the robbers than anyone realized. But a delay of just a few minutes changed everything. The robbers were already gone, and left behind was a vault that had been almost completely emptied. The next morning, the scale of what had happened began to come to light. More than $50 million had vanished. At the time, this was one of the largest bank robberies in European history, and the most terrifying part was that almost no one had realized the robbery was happening until it was too late. Police launched one of the largest investigations in the country's history. But the deeper they dug, the more complicated everything became. Most of the stolen money was never recovered, and over the years, countless theories emerged. Some blamed organized crime groups, others suspected paramilitary organizations. But the truth is, most of the people who planned this operation were never caught. Even today, the Northern Bank robbery is regarded as one of the most professional bank operations in modern history. Because this wasn't just a robbery, it was a psychological operation, one where human fear was used as a weapon.
This channel is built one story at a time. If this story kept you on edge, don't forget to subscribe. Because forgotten, unsolved stories continue right here. Until next time, goodbye.